rocking with the best.
Gangstar, the God universal, ruler universal. Came to give you exactly what you asked.
Thanks for stopping by the Badass Records podcast.
Make sure to follow on YouTube,
Instagram,
and Twitter. New episodes come out Thursdays.
We're talking people, music, and badass records.
Gangstar Foundation.
You are now rocking with the best.
Gangstar, the God universal, ruler universal. Came to give you exactly what you asked for here.
You are now rocking with the best.
Gangstar, the God universal.
So let's see here. We are recording episode 105 of Badass Records podcast. Is it Sid Sowder?
Mm-hmm.
Sowder. Okay, excellent. Too Much Rock.
Indeed.
Appreciate you being here. TooMuchRock.com, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Twitter.
Pretty much everything.
Pretty much everything.
I'm not on Threads.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's there in some fashion. I try not to duplicate content a whole lot. So, like, if you go to SoundCloud, it's not the podcast. It is the various singles I've released. If you go to YouTube, you're not going to get the podcast. You're going to get the videos of shows I go to, etc. A little different on every site.
Singles that you've released.
Yeah, I do a Too Much Rock singles series. I've released 10 or 11 7-inches where I just take a local band in town.
Yes.
They record the A-side. I pick the B-side, which is a cover for them, and I put those out. And that's where they end up on. I mean, they're vinyl,
right?
But online, I put just the A side on the on SoundCloud, and I like to keep the B side kind of unique to the vinyl. Some bands have chosen to put it online, but the spirit is that the only way to hear it is to actually get the vinyl and support bands.
Right. And you do this for free. I mean, you lose your site. You said you lose money on it in the band.
Oh yeah, it's about $1,500 to put out one of these. So I put one out. I planned initially to do like 4 a year, and that was great when I was working and making money. But it was also bad because I was working and I had no time to actually do the work. And now I'm, we'll call it retired. So
okay.
I've got the time, but it turns out I don't have the money. So we're doing like, 1 a year, 2 a year.
Gotcha. So photos and videos of shows that you shoot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the singles portion that you mentioned, and 679 podcast episodes.
Yeah, I do one a week,
And-
and I've been doing it for that long, however long that does.
Right. 679 divided by 52.
Yeah, it's
Or
not
whatever.
quite that. I have probably I probably end up doing about 49 a year, 48.
Okay.
Something at some point gets in the way, and I just haven't listened to enough music.
Right. Are you born and raised KC?
No, I
No.
moved here initially in 97.
Okay.
I'm from Indianapolis.
Okay.
And I was here from 97 to about 2002, maybe January 2003, then moved out to Boston, lived
Oh,
in
wow.
New York, lived in Chicago.
Dang.
And then came back here in 2008, 2009, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay. Siblings?
I got a younger sister. She's in Indianapolis, school teacher.
Okay, cool. Any idea how mom and dad met?
That was a party sometime
Okay.
right after high school. They actually went to the same high school, but had never met each other.
Oh, wow. Must have been a big joint.
It was a big school, but at the same time, Dad was a burnout that skipped a lot of class and spent most of his time racing cars illegally. And
Oh.
Mom was a Catholic schoolgirl who transferred to that school her senior year, and so she was a good girl. He was a bad boy, and I guess those things happen.
Right. Do you have any memories of them putting on music to listen to in the home when you guys were growing up?
Oh
or-
yeah, constantly.
Yeah? What were they into?
Largely, well, my mom's like the biggest Beatles fanatic
Okay,
ever, so there was a
cool.
lot of Beatles in the house, and some of my early records were theirs that I had worn out, that they gave me their copy, and then they bought another one. So
Nice.
that's where my Abbey Road came from.
Okay.
It was originally one of theirs, but there's just a lot of music. I mean, Dad really liked he loved Jethro Tull,
Okay.
Bob Seger,
Nice.
Steve Miller. Eric Clapton is his favorite. Mom really loved. She was a pretty big Fleetwood Mac fan, but she loved probably Rod Stewart more.
Okay.
So a lot of just variations of what we would now call classic rock.
Yeah. So some of their records that they overplayed or wore out or whatever became yours.
Well, and typically the ones that I overplayed.
You overplayed.
They would let me use their records, but I had like a crappy turntable. I've always had, from as long as I can remember, always had a turntable. But I had like the sort that you tape a nickel to get it to keep from skipping, and I just would ruin their records.
Gotcha.
And then at some point they would decide that it was my record now, and they would go buy a new copy.
How about the first one that you acquired on your own?
Yeah, my father, my mom always ran the finances in the house because my father couldn't be trusted with money. He was the sort that, came home every week and handed the check to Mom, and she would peel some money off and give back to him, and, here's your allowance for the week.
Right, yeah.
But one of the
Smart
things,
lady.
Yeah, it kept us afloat.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things that I do remember is he was allowed to buy a record every week.
Oh, hey, nice.
So I would go with him to...
Now, did that have to come out of his allowance? Or
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
But there was money allotted for a record every week.
Cool.
So I would go with him on Saturday morning to Karma or Obadiah and look through the records, and he would buy one. And once I started getting enough, birthday money or whatever, I would go and buy as well. So I think the first one I ever bought was a Bob Seger 9 Tonight live album because it was a 2 LP.
Hey.
And it was the same price as the regular.
Deal.
So I thought, I'm definitely getting my money's worth on this.
Yeah.
And then the second one I bought was Fleetwood Mac Rumors.
Okay.
Because I really loved the chain.
Sure.
And, still do, I guess.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if I need to hear much of that record anymore.
I think we've all been exposed to it.
Well, it's amazing that it's still I wouldn't say still. It's, for the last few years, it's been back in the top 10 vinyl sales every year. It's like 7 Taylor Swift records, Olivia Rodrigo record, Rumors, and then like Lana Del Rey or something.
Huh.
That's like the top 10 this year.
Wow. What about first show? Are you a show? I mean, you're a showgoer now, but I mean, whether you were dragged to one or went to one with a buddy or.
Yeah, my parents used to bring me to shows occasionally, what are concerts, I guess, very formal sort of things, rock and roll things. They weren't really into. We never went to go see the symphony or anything.
Right.
But I don't remember them. Mom tells stories of, oh no, you actually saw the Rolling Stones, but you were in me at the time. So,
You heard them.
yes, felt them most assuredly. But the first one that I remember going to by myself or without an adult, I was with a younger cousin, was in Indianapolis. It was Julian Lennon with a local band called Recordio opening.
Okay.
So they dropped us off, and I don't know, I couldn't have been but 14 or
Right,
something,
yeah,
and my
yeah.
cousin was probably 12 or maybe 13, and off we went.
God, what is the name of that Julian Lennon single that was a big hit in the 80s? I got George Harrison. I got my mind set on you, right? Mm-hmm. And Julian Lennon. God, it's on the tip of my. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But never look back from there. Just have been seeing shows since.
Yeah, it was very common for like birthdays or Christmas or whatever that I would get concert tickets.
Cool.
So my parents one time got me Rush tickets.
Ooh.
And this was the Hold Your Fire tour, so 88 or something like that. And I went with a different cousin, and my parents, or his mother dropped us off. We went to the concert, horrible seats, like third from the back, right against the wall at a big arena, and then saw the show. I think Tommy Shaw opened that one.
Oh wow!
And then afterwards, my parents picked us up and dropped us home. And my cousin, when he got home, his mom said, "You smell like pot. Where have you been?" He's like, "I've been at a Rush concert.
Yeah.
If I didn't come home smelling like pot, then you'd have to worry because I wasn't at the Rush concert."
Yeah, exactly. Nice. So Too Much Rock has been alive and kicking for 25 years. Just a lot of impressive numbers in all of the facets of the things that you do and put up there. And I just wanted to mention that because it's props worthy in my mind, and kudos to you for. I mean, that is seriously impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, I just don't know when to give up.
Yeah.
I mean, it originally started off as a paper zine, and then and it's kind of where the name Too Much Rock came from. I was going to shows and then writing them up, and then putting them in my zine, and then realized that like by the time the zine came out, like the show was
So
5
far
weeks
in the
ago,
rearview,
6
yeah,
weeks
yeah,
ago,
yeah.
and then I had seen, when I first lived in Indianapolis, and back in the '80s. There would be a show every 2 or 3 weeks at a VFW hall or
Right.
Knights of Columbus or something like that, and that was it. So it was kind of easy to keep up, but as things in times changed and the kind of music I was interested in kind of became a little more popular as quote unquote alternative kind of usurped some of the post-punk and everything. Those sort of things started to get played at radio stations, at actual venues.
Yeah.
Then I started seeing a lot more shows, and it's like it was too much rock for the paper zine, and that's when
cool.
that's when it went digital in '97.
Okay. You have the website. Everything is handsome and well put together, but your verbiage is very clean. And there's a voice in there. You're direct in that. If I wanna write about my shoes for 10 sentences, that's up to me. And this is about my experience. It's not a review. And what else did I see? I'll probably bands reach out to me. There's a good chance I'll be there anyway. Unless I don't think you're good, then you probably don't want me there.
Someone the other day, and by the other day, it could have been a year ago.
Right.
And time is, it's all lost in my head. But said, I know your reputation is for calling it as you see it. I'm like, I don't think so. There are very few bands that I can't appreciate.
Sure.
When I see a band and I'm like, I don't understand what they're doing, this makes no sense to me, I usually try to figure that out. I'll go back and see them a few times. And there's bands in town like Nerva, for example. I'm like, what is this noise? I just don't get it. It's just loud and horrible. And then like next time I'm like, next time I'm like, oh my God, there's so many layers here. And I've just finally been able to peel things back. So there are bands that I don't enjoy, but for the most part, bands that there aren't bad bands. They're just ones that aren't for me.
Yeah. Well, not everything can be for everybody.
Yeah.
And sometimes the timing just isn't right. You might be into somebody that you didn't care for 15 years ago,
One of my favorite bands ever is Husker Du. But when I first heard them, I was like, nah, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is no good.
They're intense.
Everyone loves Zen Arcade. What is this? I don't get this. It's huge. It's
Right.
sprawling. I want punk rock that's, straight ahead, SST. I want, no nuance. I want none of this. And then, 10 years later, I hear the album again. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. I just wasn't ready for it.
Exactly.
I wasn't ready for it when I was, just wanting to hear more Misfits and Sex Pistols.
Yeah. And, kudos are warranted for acknowledging that in oneself. That I just wasn't ready for it. It was probably a great album back then too. I just wasn't ready for it.
I think a lot of people weren't ready for it then. I didn't discover it, and in the early and mid '80s, it was the late '80s for me. But at the time, there were people who were like, 2LP. What kind of rock posers are these? Is this the latest Yes record? What's going on?
And then also, I felt I picked up on that same directness when we were messaging, and I asked you for your list, which thank you very much for sharing with me. But you made a point to distinguish between favorites and influential, I believe, and I was curious if you would elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. I think there are lots of records that really changed me, my outlook, in some ways. I mean, I'm Generation X. I'm the generation of tribes, right? Where you figured out who your people were and then you committed to that fully.
Right.
That
yeah.
doesn't exist today. For better,
interesting.
probably.
Right.
But then you based your entire identity around it, and you're like, well, I'm a punk now. And that's really what happened for me.
Okay.
And so there are records that I'm like, when I heard that record, I went, oh, this is me now. This has changed everything. I mean, my favorite band when I was a kid was Styx. And
Tommy Shaw all over again.
Yeah. Then sometime in, the mid 80s, I stumbled onto probably Sex Pistols, kind of starting those things, and then Misfits and those sorts of bands, and Ramones. And then it was like, oh, this changes things.
Yeah.
And some of those I don't listen to a lot anymore. And especially there was an era where I was very engaged in kind of the straight edge hardcore scene of the late 80s, even into the early 90s. And albums that just like, I mean, you just take something classic, take Minor Threat.
Yeah.
That is a band that I listened to and went, well, again, this changed my life. This is who I am now.
Yeah.
But it's not a record I put on much anymore. It's not, when I hear it, I'm like, yeah, I'm in a club and the song comes on. I know all the words and I know every break and every guitar, silhouette that happens in there.
Sure.
But it's not like a band or an album that is my favorite, but boy, did it change everything for me. And then ones that are my favorite typically came around a little later. I found more joy in not so much the punk records and the hardcore records that put me on the journey, but the next step of kind of the post-punk bands, and then kind of the bands that followed the pub rock, the Angry Young Men bands of Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson and Graham Parker, and those are the bands that, like, when I listen to those albums now, I mean, I listen to them all the time, like, those are the ones that still stick with me.
Sure. So how... I'm trying to picture your room of vinyl. I imagine you have a dedicated space for it, and it's organized in some fashion. How big are we talking numbers wise? Ish.
Big-ish.
Okay.
I think there were years when I was a horrible collector. In the early 90s to the mid 90s, say 1997 even, I was just ridiculous. I was in that post-punk phase. Cure records, for example. I loved the Cure, still do. But I would pick up every Cure record there was. Like, do I have the German press of this Love Cats 12-inch or not? I don't know. Let's get that one. And I bought everything.
Okay.
Those days, it was bad, but not as bad as it is now, because now you can just go to Discogs and, if you got the money, you can get anything that's ever existed, right? At that point, for a while, I was living in Bloomington, Indiana, right after college, and even during college. There were, on the same block, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 record stores on the same block.
Is that IU?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I would go to every record store every day and go through the new release section.
Every day?
Every day, all 5 record stores.
Wow.
And so I found the things I wanted, but I had worked for them and I didn't pay collector's prices. So I used to have a giant collection, and then I kept moving. And you know how it is in your early 20s to your early 30s or whatever. You probably have a lot of different houses, and I sure did. And I got so tired of moving. Literally, like, everything I own in life is like, here's this futon, here are my clothes, and here are 43 crates of records. And so I, at some point, probably at the wrong time, sold everything.
Oh, man. Okay.
And at some point, I went into Recycled Sounds here in KC, and just crate after crate. And Anne's like, okay, take them all. And then I did that later with my 7 inches. And I was like, I'm going to figure out which of these are worth tons of money and which ones aren't. Oh, this Fugazi 7-inch should be worth $50 on its own. I'm going to sort through all these and figure this out. And I never did. I mean, it was like years went by and I went, I just don't want these things anymore. So I got rid of those things. And then, like everybody who ever gets rid of their vinyl, they feel really sad and lonely without it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I started picking things up again.
Okay.
And I have picked up things that are near and dear to my heart.
Good.
And then new things happen a lot more than going back for near and dear.
Okay. That's fun. Nice to have a mix of the two, right?
Yeah. So, and most of the new things are locals. I really believe that, the best band is the local band.
Sure.
It doesn't matter where you are. If you're not supporting the local bands, then you're just not supporting music.
Yeah. I love that.
So the new collection is largely built around around local bands.
Okay. So shooting tonight at Farewell, and is this it's that bands reach out to me bit of verbiage. I mean, you go to a lot of shows and you shoot them for your own project for Too Much Rock.
Mm-hmm.
But do bands reach out to you and say, "Hey, we'd like you to, come and it'll professionally we'll pay you and you give us the end product sort of deal"? Does that happen as well, or?
That happens, but not much.
Okay.
Typically, I don't want to waste my time doing something that I don't want to do. So I'd have to be pretty hard up for a band to be like, "Hey, we'll pay you to come out here and take these pictures." I'm like, "Well, if you're a good band, I want to go anyway and find the pictures are yours." I mean, how it typically works for Too Much Rock is I do kind of a low res 1080 sort of photo that I post online, or maybe 800 that I post online that's watermarked. And any band can do anything they want with any of those photos. Even if they crop out the logo, fine, just give me credit some other way. They're kind of low res. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
Occasionally a band would be like, "Hey, I really want this one for a record." And I'm like, "Well, we'll work out something that I license it." Or, most of the time when some people will come out and be like, I just want to use this for my profile pic. I'm like, "Great, have at it." And they're like, "Well, I want the big version because I need to use it for, promo for something that's running in the newspaper in St. Louis or whatever." I'm like, "Fine, $10.
Okay.
Just enough that, there is value to what I do.
Right.
But there's no band in this town that should be paying anybody hundreds of dollars because nobody in this town's making that kind of money."
Right.
Now, I mean, if I got a phone call from Green Day tomorrow that said, "Hey, we want to use one of your photos," I'm like, "Great, go ahead and have, Reprise write out that check, and, it's not going to be a $10 check." Each to their ability, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Cool. So
I'll give you a funny story though about bands reaching out. I had someone reach out about 3 weeks ago and said, "Hi, I'm a regular reader, and I don't ever think I've seen you cover this band, and this band's name is this, and they're really good. I think you should cover them." And she signed her name, and I'm like, "Well, that name looks familiar." And it was the mom of somebody in the band that she was recommending. So she was plugging her son's band, saying, "Hey, I think you should really check them out." Like, so it's not often that I get moms saying,
Interesting.
"Please do this."
And was it a band that you had heard of?
Yeah. And in fact, I wrote back to her and said, I'd love to cover them, but and named the player is just, too handsome and debonair, and it just distracts me from writing about him. And but no, and it's a band that I figure I will see eventually. We've talked. I've already had conversations with that person beforehand. That was
Cool.
like, "I can't make that one, but yeah,
Right.
invite me out again, and I'll be there."
And so you're going out like 2-3 nights a week?
Right now, it's a little slower. Just January is a horrible time for bands. Nobody wants to tour through Kansas City this time of year. They're going to get stuck, trying to get from Colorado to Kansas City, and I-70 is going to be shut down, and they're going to be cold in a van, whatever.
With all their gear.
Yeah, and hopefully still on the roads.
Yeah.
Not in a ditch
Right.
somewhere. So not much tours through this time of year. Things really don't pick up until like South by Southwest starts to happen, and then suddenly everybody's thinking, "Well, I got to get down there and back from there, so where can I play?" But during the summer, during kind of the high season, I may be out 4 nights a week.
Okay.
And now it's kind of 1 or 2.
So There's got to be a collection of venue owners, managers, security folks that know you well. And is that a network or is that mostly made up of good people? Hey, I'm here to shoot, and they're like, heck yeah. And most of the time, do you develop relationships with those folks, or is it just kind of, hey, good to see you, and you go about your business, and then you get out of there? Or...
Yeah, I know that's kind of an interesting question. It's all over the place.
Okay.
A venue, if I'm shooting at Truman, it's because some band's publicist has mailed me and said, hey, please come out and do that. And I don't have a whole lot to do with anybody there. I kind of go take my 3 photos, no flash, or first 3 songs, no flash, and then go hide somewhere in the wings, watch the rest of the show, take my notes, then get out of there.
Okay.
But if it's something like, you're playing at, or you're shooting at the greenhouse or somebody's basement venue, you're not going to, you can't get out of there without knowing that person.
Yeah, exactly.
And knowing things about them. Go to enough house venues and you're like, well, look, it's laundry day for whoever.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So it all varies on the size of the venue and the type of bands I'm working with.
And is there some kind of understanding for, cover?
I wish.
Oh.
Some venues there are. Some venues have been very kind, and one even has a little VIP card that I can flash to somebody at the door if they don't know who I am. But others, it's I'll have to either work with the bands and say, hey, make sure and get me on your guest list, or some venues I just pay.
Okay, interesting. Kind of all over the place.
It was easier, like I said, when I was working more. I had a lot more disposable income. Then I didn't really worry about it. And and $10 for 5 times a week, and I can afford that. But now I'm more likely to hit a band and be like, hey,
how's that guest list looking?
I do want to come out and cover you at the minibar, but you got room for me?
Right.
And I've never had a band be like, no, go away.
Right.
But
now is the head count on a guest list determined by the venue typically?
It depends on the place. Maybe it's a venue, maybe it's the promoter.
Okay.
But yeah, kind of rule of thumb is usually it's like 1 person per band member.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
And if it's somebody like, that's playing a bigger show that's a touring band, then, they will do what a ticket buy, and they will buy so ever many tickets so they can fit in all the reporters or photographers or videographers or whatever they want to be at a particular show.
Right.
So if somebody's touring through it, the Truman, they're not like, well, there's 5 of us, we get 5 people. No, they'll have a guest list of, 65 people from whoever the label or the promoter or the press agent or whatever wanted to show up.
Do you wind up interacting with promoters often too as you go about your ways?
I try to stay mostly in the smallest shows, so the promoter is usually somebody in the band or somebody who's just part of the venue staff.
Right.
So I don't really interact a whole lot with the promoter that's putting on a gig at, if I'm at T-Mobile Center, I don't know who the promoter is.
Right.
We're not going to be friends. But if it's somebody like, I was at Howdy last night, Aaron Rhodes put the show on and he was there and we talked,
Cool.
So those things happen.
Cool. Well, thanks again for sending me your list. I'd like to run through them chronologically,
right.
Release date. So 1970, Paranoid, Black Sabbath. Second of 19 for them, 8 tracks, 41 minutes. Incredibly important album for the genre. How did this one land in your lap? And are you versed in their entire library?
Sure. This is one of those that came from my parents.
Okay.
In fact, it was the first record that I ever received.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people got like a Peter Pan, turn the page book, Ding!
You get Black Sabbath Paranoid.
I was 3 or 4, and they gave me their copy because I had pretty much damaged it by playing it. And then they bought another one. Because I loved Iron Man.
Yeah.
That was my song, and I was allowed to, on my parents' stereo, to put on the headphones, and I knew I was only supposed to turn it up to the 1, or the first tick.
Yeah.
But I would turn it up until it was barely touching the first tick, but as far over it as I could get to it and listen to that. And so I actually still have that pressing, which was the
Nice.
first record that I ever received.
Very cool. And so, and Iron Man is probably the most globally known, but there's a lot of really cool tracks on that record.
Yeah, I don't know. War Pigs and
Yeah.
Paranoid, give it a run for money. I think all of them are just part of the canon.
Right, exactly. How about other Sabbath records?
I love the Ozzy records the best.
Oh, okay.
So the first four all have fantastic moments on them. I think Paranoid's probably the best. I think most people that aren't trying to be contrarians probably think that that's the best. But it's certainly the one that I was introduced to, and so much of what you love the best is what you were introduced to.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suspect somebody probably came in during the Dio era and is like, Dio's a much better frontman than Ozzy. And I'm like,
This is-
if that's where you came in.
Yeah, this is only the second Sabbath record to be on somebody's list. The other was 4. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that the first time a Sabbath record made somebody's list, it wasn't Paranoid. And so when I asked, it was absolutely because it was his introduction to Sabbath.
Yeah,
But so this for you, this one, and then on to solo Ozzy stuff.
Oh, no. Just the ones that Ozzy fronted.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So
okay.
I prefer those first 4 records the most. I mean, there are fun things that happened afterwards.
Right.
But it got a little spotty.
Did you ever get into solo Ozzy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sure I've got them all. And,
Oh, nice.
Well, I don't know. Something probably came out after, I'll say I got them all up until like Ultimate Sin, which was, I don't know, 89,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
After that,
Was that before? Would that be before No More Tears?
yeah, I think that was the one right before.
The one right
that.
before. Okay.
In that late 80s, I had switched over from everything must be punk rock, and so that the last gasp was that Ultimate Sin record, and then it's just that's not cool to listen to anymore. Now I've got to listen to cool music.
I hear that. From there, we go to one of 2 on your list that were out in 1979. The first being Look Sharp. Joe Jackson, first of 22 for him. 11 tracks, 36 minutes, killer album cover art. One could uninformedly say one-hit wonder. But 22 records, I think, suggests otherwise. Was this also via your folks, or what's the...
No, honestly, I don't know how I came in to Joe Jackson. I mean, certainly there were radio songs, and She Be Going Out With Him was a big hit.
Yeah.
So that may have been where I came into Joe Jackson.
Okay.
I don't know that at the time. This isn't one that I bought back in the 70s. This isn't one that I bought until, right around 90, around that time, that I really got into it more. I didn't own it until that point. But I think I came into Joe Jackson first through Elvis Costello.
But what's the connection there?
I think they're just part of the same scene of stiff records, and kind of the growing out of what they referred to as like the angry young man era.
Okay, is Stiff, is that a label?
Yes.
Okay.
And they were a punk label that, like, Nick Lowe produced a lot for them. Elvis Costello recorded for them. And I think that they were artists that didn't really fit in musically with punk rock, but there was a lot of connection just around the urgency of their music, around kind of that there's a bristle and an energy and a backs up sort of thing that kind of let them fit in a little bit. And so for me, that's how I transitioned into that, and that made a whole lot of sense to me. Like, oh, I don't really need to hear just somebody screaming anymore. I got somebody screaming a a little smarter,
Right.
And there's
Perhaps
a point
a little
here.
more melodically.
Certainly, that could be the case.
Right.
I mean, compared to some of the, I don't know. I've always appreciated the melodic side of punk anyway. The 77 sort of punk that could have been in an alternate world, radio hits.
Right. Well, it was cool stuff. I thought that I didn't. I mean, like there's something about the name, Joe Jackson. Like that feels familiar. I don't know how. I don't know why. And it wasn't until track 3 played during my listen, I was like, oh, okay. But again, 22 records, handsome collection. Admirable musicianship. And was this one on your influential side or your favorite side? I can't.
It's a favorite side.
Okay.
This is one that I probably revisit 6-8 times a year that I play through, and there's a world of music out there. It's hard to even listen to your favorites just because, especially with the podcast. Every week I try to add 7 records to my collection, and that's what makes the podcast. It's just whatever I've added to my collection. Wow. So I'm constantly listening to new music, and it's not like I just, with those ones, I want to give everything 4 listens kind of minimum, and like in different eras, like one with a headphone
4?
record. Yeah.
I've always gone by 3 will get you qualified enough to have an opinion about it, but you're going
I like to get 4. I like one headphones maybe walking around town or even at the gym, and then one just maybe at my computer, and then one on the stereo, and I love to get a car listen in if I can as well, and because like all of those are just like different ways to experience an album.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll hear an album that Brent Windler here in Kansas City. That record I listened to just like on my computer while I was working, like nothing. And then like headphones walking around town, and went, oh my God, I'm just totally. This is everything now.
I love that.
And so sometimes you got to find the right mode for the record to understand it. So anyway, I listen to a lot of music that way, and then I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm neglecting all the best music in the world. All my favorite ones I don't get to enough, but this is one that, if it's not a monthly listen, it's kind of close to that.
Right. Nice. So record stores. I would imagine, please correct me if I'm wrong, you've been to all of them here in town.
There's one in North Kansas City that I haven't been to.
What's that called?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
But I was complaining to a friend who lives in North Kansas City about some of the things that's missing, and he's like, there's a record store. I'm like, oh, yeah, there is one, isn't there? But I haven't been there yet, so
Yeah.
I've got a field trip to make.
Hey, nice. So I didn't catch on your site that is what makes up the podcast, is what you've added to your collection.
Yeah, I don't think this week, what do I want to play? The podcast really grew out of the fact that I was just buying so much music, and I wanted to make sure that I was giving all of it at least the attention it deserved.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in the era where you bought a record a week or maybe every month, when you just didn't have access to everything.
Right.
And then when you bought it, you listened to the hell out of that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that cassette was all you listened to for like 2 weeks because
Right.
it was that new record you just bought.
Yeah. Got that new record smell even.
But when things started changing, and like promoters will send me, I literally get 75 or 100 emails a day from promoters that like, hey, listen to this record.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
You reply to all of them?
No, not even close.
I love that.
Which means I miss things, and sometimes I'll mail the promoter back after 6 months and like, hey, I just finally listened to that record you were sending me. I know you're probably not even working it for the artist anymore, but I do plan on featuring that. And they're like, great, good to hear. I'm not getting paid anymore for this. My
okay.
work
Right.
with that band ended already.
Right.
But so there's just so much music, and I was listening to so much, and I was worried I wasn't giving it the attention. So that's what I decided to do the podcast. I'm like, well, if I limit myself to like the 7 records a week, which it turns out to be about my half-hour podcast, 7 songs usually makes up about 23 or 26 minutes, and that kind of makes my half-hour podcast. I I knew that I would like, well, now I'm definitely giving every record I buy a full listen, not just picking up a record going like, oh, I played it once and put it on the shelf and forget all about it. At least I know everything at the time I'm going to know about that record.
Yeah.
As we talked about years later, I may discover entirely new things
Yeah.
about it, but at least I've given that record a shot and I understand what it's about.
So 30 minutes-ish per episode, once a week. Is there video?
No.
No, okay. So the editing part of putting together an episode must be relatively painless for you then. If it's 30 minutes and no video, you can kind of just boom, bam, bip, and put it where it needs to go.
It's all dropped into GarageBand, and I sort my songs and then quickly do my chats about each of the songs, and it's a waterfall all down nice and pretty, and usually only takes me about an hour to record the half-hour podcast.
Okay, cool. So when you are out shopping, do you have favorites, or do you try to hit everything evenly? Or if it's not something you want to get into, that's totally fine too. But I'm just nosy and curious.
I think every record store in town, slight reservations, I think every record store in town is a good one.
Okay.
I think anybody that's helping to push this media is great. Anyone who's pushing music is great, and there's no record store in town that is horrible. There are some that one that's closing that I wasn't a big fan of.
Okay.
But most people are just fantastic. I mean, the folks at say Sister Ann's or Judy at Mills are just amazing people.
Yeah.
They're just wonderful, wonderful people doing great things for our community. So I'm always happy to buy something from them. But every record store in town, I'm happy it's there.
And there's a grand opening happening as we speak in Independence, right?
I never make it to Independence,
Okay.
but what's happening out there?
Kimmy Queen, who I was working at Seventh Heaven, or maybe still is, opened her own spot.
Oh.
With, I forget her partner's name, Cody something or other. They were supposed to open a week ago, but it was one of those absolutely
frozen days.
Yes. So they pushed it, and I think as we speak right now on the Saturday the 20th of January, they're having their grand opening with snacks and drinks and music you can purchase.
And why aren't we there? We could have been doing this on site.
That's true. Probably too much basketball on the calendar for me to have made that happen, but
The Badass Records remote is coming.
I've done 3.
Oh.
I've done one at Skate Bar in St. Joe.
Rest in peace.
Right. But they have something newer and bigger coming that they haven't told us about yet. Is that right?
Yeah, and maybe not in St. Joe.
Right. Yes, that's right. Because they were maybe asking what folks thought.
Yeah.
And then I did one on the stage at Aztec Shawnee Theater. Mm-hmm. And then I actually flew to New York and did one at a tattoo parlor. It was pretty random how it all came together, but I've now got a rough idea of what it takes to pack all this stuff up and either put it in my car or get on a plane with it. So yeah, I mean, it can be done and has been done, but most of them happen right here. But I would imagine that staff or ownership of these places, these record stores that you shop at, enjoy seeing you come through the door.
Yeah, I think they enjoy seeing any customer come through the door.
Fair.
But yeah, I think we're on friendly terms and we know each other's names and things of that sort. Way back when, I don't know, a decade ago, I had worked out something with Mills where there was going to be like the Mills Record of the Week on the podcast. But we could never quite get it to be consistent enough to keep it going.
Gotcha.
But the thought was, hey, whatever I'm promoting is going to get like a 5% off or something at the store. And, I don't know, maybe there's room for a crossover like that to happen again, something mutually advantageous for everyone.
Well, we stay in 1979 with Gang of Four, Entertainment, exclamation point. First of 10, 12 tracks, 39 minutes. Who the heck are these guys?
Oh boy, I hope you enjoyed the listen.
I did.
This is my favorite album of all time.
Oh my gosh,
here.
for real?
This is it. And it's been that way since somewhere in the mid '90s, maybe. And it's a band that I certainly did not discover until later. Sometime in the early '90s, there were several members, or I think maybe even just one member, that was in a band called Shriekback that I was a music director at a college radio station, and that was being plugged.
What, in Indiana?
Yeah.
Okay. At IU?
Yes.
Nice. Music director of the station as a student?
Well, it was a student radio.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
community student combo thing.
Right.
WQAX, rest in peace.
Cool.
But that band Shriekback included, I think, Dave Allen. It must have been maybe from that'd been Gang of Four, so through that I kind of went back and dug into other things and went, this is it. As soon as I heard this album, you hear Andy Gill's very shrill, wonderful guitar tone that just like, this is it. This is perfect. That noise is just somehow completing and grading at the same time. So that's how I came into Gang of Four, is through later projects of its band members.
Now, you've mentioned genres a couple times already. Is that an important thing to you, to identify an artist and where they belong? And is there ever fluidity in that, or?
It is my life's passion. I am really big into taxonomy. And of course, it only makes sense to each individual, right? I can say, oh, no, that's this. And somebody else can say, oh, no, that's not dark wave. That's just straight up post-punk. You're like, all right.
This is post-punk, correct?
This is post-punk.
Okay.
This is, I don't know. If post-punk could have a definition, I think this has to fit into it, or the term doesn't mean anything.
Right.
But yeah, for me, I really, really like that. And it just helps me understand how a band fits in, how it fits in with other music, how it fits in with other labels, what other people are doing with just, I kind of need that. And I've got nasty OCD issues. So for me, that taxonomy really helps.
Sure.
For bands that are like, I get, as I said, tons of emails from publicists, and like, and this band, it defies all genres. I'm like, already I don't like them. I can't handle that.
Right.
So then I listen to them, and they're like, what are you talking about? They defy all genres unless someone has ever heard the Ramones before. They sound just like them.
Right.
But no promoter's ever gonna be like, listen to my band. It sounds just like this other one you like, but not as good.
Now, I am, I'm not to draw a comparison, but I am right there with you in that I value it a lot too. However, there's a lot, if you take a sort of a late 70s to early 90s swath, there's a lot of things that popped up in that time frame, right? And I think that I lack, I don't get too invested in it because I lack the confidence to know that this record here is post-punk unless I read it somewhere. And okay, now I know where it goes. But have you been, lower on the confidence scale in that regard and watched yourself rise, or did you come out a superstar? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think part of it might just be that I've got an inflated sense of self and ego that I'm pretty comfortable with. Hey, you may have a difference of opinion, and then now we're going to talk about it, and but I'm comfortable making that right out of the gate statement about anything, and then maybe I'm completely wrong. That discussion can happen with somebody else, and they can decide I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'll learn something. I mean, certainly, it gets fishy in there in some of those areas where you're like, well, what is that dream pop? Oh no, that's bliss pop. Oh, what, you sure that's not shoegaze? And you're like, all right, well, for me, I figured out in my head what I'm going to call it, and I'll tell you why I'm going to call it that. So
And does all of that just live up here? I mean, you don't have a gospel that you lug
no,
around?
no. The Gospel of Sid sounds like an excellent book for me to write, but it would be so pedantic and nobody would be interested in that. And like a study in, oh my God, old man yells at cloud. Because as you mentioned, I mean, things get fluid, and certainly modern listeners, anybody certainly in the Gen Z or later, there are no tribes anymore. I mean, you listen to everything, and everything is everything. And so a lot of the bands that I see, they're kind of Gen Z bands, like they just mix it all together, and they're comfortable doing that. And so, you know, when I see some of those bands now, I'm like, oh, well, okay, where do they fit for me? What do they sound like that I know of? What are they familiar with? And then, you know, sometimes if somebody reads too much rock, they're gonna like see me say, oh, this band sounds like whatever, and that band is probably going to be some band I mentioned from, you know, 1984 or something, and they're like, why would he say that when there's a whole genre? There's like 12 bands currently that all sound like this, and why is he comparing them back to something from 84? So I don't have that information.
Right.
So for me, I'm comfortable saying I know what this is, but with more information, I would say, oh no, this is part of that genre that grew out of, you know, Salt Lake City bands from 2017 that all sounded like this. Like, I don't know. Is that a thing? I mean, years ago, I mean, San Diego had this crazy thing in the early 90s, in their weird, which we referred to as Spock rock back then.
Oh.
More so because they all had the same haircut,
Funny.
with the same Spock
yeah.
haircut. But so those little scenes that kind of create their own sound, sometimes you find those later, and sometimes you never find them,
right.
And sometimes they never explode. But they may, you know, listening to a band of that era, like an Antioch era, or somebody like, well, of course you have to group them into that little world, and that's how they make sense. But if you don't know about that world, you may listen to that and go like, wow, this is way out of left field. I'm like, well, unless you knew, and then it made sense.
So, and I know this is not necessarily your wheelhouse, but just where when you first heard a 311 or a Sublime, where do you put them?
This is my biggest blind spot. That era of music. I mean, Sublime we all just call generically that. Oh yeah, there's some sort of bastard version of ska, right? You're like, well, yeah, fine, yeah, we'll give them some of that, but it's not any version that I appreciate.
Sure.
But for me, like, I don't know the difference between Disturbed and 311.
Okay, fair enough.
For me, anything that happened like in that post grunge new metal era, for me is all just like, I've never enjoyed any element of that whatsoever. So it's all just like one bucket of things that Sid doesn't like that he will call new metal, and people are like, no, Slipknot doesn't sound anything like that, like Godsmack. And I'm like, I don't know.
Okay,
it's all the same band to me.
Yeah. Now, how about artists with larger libraries that wind up with releases in different categories in the racks in the record stores? Do you have an opinion about that, or? Yeah,
well, when I'm organizing, for a while I had my collection organized by more or less bands within genres, and so then now you got to think, well, they moved a lot during that career. How do I put them in this right place? And so, you know, I think about that. Largely, there are bands, very few bands, made big shifts. Somebody like The Cure that started off kind of as a punk band in the very kind of mid '70s era. Kind of also ran not great at that, and then like great post-punk band, and goth pioneers, and then like the fun little weird pop eras in the middle, and then like the expansive sort of arena goth that happens today. Like there's a lot of things that happen in there, and I could shove them in any one of those buckets. I could largely it's for me like where they fit in my world. So
Sure.
back in those days, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to slide them next to Depeche Mode because that was that era that I was listening to them together. And everyone at that point is like, oh, you like Depeche Mode? You must like The Cure because this is 1987.
Yeah.
And that's just, it all worked together
Yes.
that way. So for me, that's where they would put, but I could very well be like, oh, no, this is a goth band. Slide them over in that collection there. And they live in there now instead. And you could make a case for that.
So you've never gone alphabetical by artist name?
No, not really. Because I think if I had to share a collection with somebody else and they wanted to find things, I'd have to do that because otherwise they would never know. Like, of course, Robin Hitchcock goes next to Billy Bragg because of Bingo Handjob era, and that's why REM is right there. So like for me, that all makes sense, but for somebody else, it certainly wouldn't.
Sure. Billy Bragg, have you ever given Wilco a listen?
Oh yeah.
And I mean, they seem to be genre jumpers for me. Is that fair, or do you find that they are this?
I don't know. I think Wilco are Wilco. I think, when you look at earlier Uncle Tupelo sort of era, it feels a little different than the straight up kind of, I don't know, if it's just American rock, Heartland rock, whatever you might want to call them now.
Sure.
Dad
Yeah.
rock in my world. But, I was told by somebody else that dad rock is just whatever your dad listened to. So for me, it was really weird someone to say, I forget what it was, but it was like they were insisting that listen to dad rock. Oh, like bands from the early 2010s, dad rock. And I'm like, no. Imagine Dragons aren't dad rock.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think for me, I think of Wilco as one thing, not as somebody who's progressed a whole lot.
Okay. Now, do you ever get hit up by folks that want to borrow records? And is that a thing that you participate in or no?
No, it doesn't really happen a whole lot. I mean, I will send digital records to people all the time. My ex-wife will oh, you really like this record, and then I'll zip that up and ship it over to her via WeTransfer and do that. I think other people probably just send links to Spotify or whatever at this point.
Yeah.
So there's very few things that I would have that don't exist in some way that I could get to somebody else,
Right.
At least in a way that would allow them to consume, even if it's just like, hey, someone has uploaded this all to YouTube, you can listen to this album there, and then they're going to go oh yeah, this is great, I'm going to buy that one, or I'm moving on. Nobody's like, hey, can I borrow your record to make a cassette copy?
Right.
It's
Fair
it's
enough.
not that era anymore.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of YouTube, I didn't peek at your YouTube portion of Too Much Rock. If the podcast is audio only, what's happening on the YouTube page?
That's video from the shows.
Oh, that's right. I did see that.
Yeah.
I did see that. Cool. So Inside My Brain, Angry Samoans, 1980. First of 5 EPs, 6 tracks, 9 minutes. Late 70s LA, 4 guitarists. How'd you discover these guys?
There was an era that I would just go to the record stores, and this is one that very early and influential for me. Is I just go to the record stores and look for things that look like a punk record and buy it. There wasn't any way to know. I mean, you could. It wasn't going to be written up in Spin or Rolling Stone or some magazine like that I would have access to, and I wasn't hip enough in those mid 80s years to know that Maximum Rock and Roll existed. So I just look at something that looked like it was going to be punk rock and buy it. Occasionally, I would get some guidance from somebody who worked at the store.
Nice.
There was a record store called Karma in Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
That the Sloppy Steve from the band Sloppy Seconds worked at, and he would point things to me and be like, oh, I'm thinking about this, and then he pointed at the Buzzcocks product, which was a cassette box set of everything they'd released. And like, no, you really need that. I'm like, I've never heard of the Buzzcocks. He's like, oh no, you really like that. So I bought it, and like, he was right. It's fantastic. But most of the time, it was just me flipping through and going, "Oh yeah, that looks punk rock." And
Sure.
the cover of that one, not the same cover you have here.
Oh.
But,
Is that the one with the lady that has the thing going in through her skull?
yeah, that was I think the original EP. I had the cassette
Okay.
that included some bonus tracks, and it has someone a painting of somebody kind of melting in an electric chair.
Oh, wow.
But I was like, oh yeah, so I bought it.
That's punk AF
and
right there.
fantastic. and that worked out sometimes, and then sometimes I get a weird metal record that I thought, well, that I missed out. That one wasn't a punk record at all.
Now, in situations like that, would you ever take it to a secondhand spot and sell it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
At that,
Separate from your mass exoduses.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In those days, kind of traded away with somebody. Be
There you
like,
go.
Hey, I've got this Overkill record, and it's called "Fuck You" and had a middle finger on it. And I thought, surely that's punk rock. Turns out it was not. But I may find somebody else, and they're like, oh yeah. So I ended up with like a Love and Rockets record in trade. So it was a good move on my part. I think.
Interesting. And last but not least, The Crew, 7 seconds. 18 tracks, 21 minutes. There was 1984, I think, but then there was another version that had 24 tracks and was 30 minutes that I guess they put out shortly
Yeah.
after. Nevertheless, 3 cassette demos, 9 EPs, and then this, I believe, is their second of 10 LPs, and it's hardcore punk from Reno, Nevada. And this, to me, was like, This should be somehow, near the punk rock definition, because it's, high energy, real quick tracks, making no, pulling no punches, making no bones about the things that they want to say. I don't know if this is textbook punk or if it's got a different genre. What is it for you?
Yeah, I think they would have just refer to themselves as a punk rock band.
Okay.
But for me, they were a straight edge band. They were singing about things that just nobody else was. I mean, I won't say nobody else. There were a handful of other bands, and literally a handful at that time. But the messages in these songs, and I mean, songs like Not Just Boys Fun. Amazing. I mean, busy saying that, punk rock isn't just about these macho bullshit boys. And there weren't other people saying that at the time.
No.
I mean,
I wouldn't think.
I hate when people make statements like that. Surely there was.
Right.
And, X-ray specs or whatever, we're saying that. But especially in the hardcore world where things were, at that point, just a lot of bruisers. A lot of people into it just so they could fight.
Yeah.
And 7 seconds, saying a song like, it's not just boys fun, just really changed a lot of things. And there's, songs like Trust or things of that sort on here, just fill a void that I did not realize that you could say in punk rock.
Okay.
And so that's why I was like, oh, this is different. This is expanding.
And straight edge by definition is
Don't drink, don't smoke, don't fuck.
that's exactly what I thought it was, and these cats are cut from that fabric.
Yeah, I think cut from that fabric.
Huh.
I think that it wasn't as textbook as Minor Threat or certainly the bands that Uniform Choice or Billingsgate or any of the bands that kind of followed in that era that were the post New York hardcore tough guy straight edge bands.
Yeah.
And this is earlier. I mean, this is '84, and so predating Youth of Today sort of things, or I don't know, maybe not predating. It all depends on when someone existed and when that album actually came out, right?
Yeah.
But it was very early on, and I think for me, it's just that message that was there.
Interesting. I can't explain how or why, but that is a straight edge hardcore punk band are two things that are difficult for me to mentally marry. Mm-hmm. And the part I can't really explain is because hardwired in my brain is punk rock is equivalent to smoking, fucking, drinking, fighting, being a rebel, chaos, anarchy, et cetera, et cetera. And the only other place I've come across that difficulty in marrying is stoner metal, which is for sure a thing that is out there. But I've always affiliated, the notion of being stoned or baked or high or whatever with reggae, for example, or something sunshiny and warm or relaxing or trancey. But to ingest marijuana and then either enjoy or perform some version of heavy metal is perplexing to me. And but there's a lot of folks that are into that.
Well, one of the records that I pulled out of my dad's collection early on was a Uriah Heep record.
Okay.
And so Dad, and maybe that's where all my taxonomy comes in, Dad said, this is acid rock. It's a very stoner record.
Huh.
And so for
Uriah Heep.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, The Magician. That's a great record.
Okay. I'll have to check it out.
But so for me, I was, well, and also, I mean, I grew up in the early 70s, mid 70s, where my parents' love for music was equal to their love of pot.
Oh,
And so
okay.
my house was just one big fishbowl for me as a kid. And so music and everything was stoner everything for me. So Black Sabbath certainly fit in just as well when they were high. And so stoner and metal work well for me. It just makes sense.
Would they smoke in front of you guys?
Oh, yeah.
At all ages, or did they wait until you were X?
No. I have very early memories of my job in the back seat is to pass the joint from some family member to a different one.
Really? And did they have any, like, hey, don't talk about this at school or any of that kind of thing? Or they just didn't care at all?
It was the era of Cheech and Chong. I
Sure.
think everybody was talking about it and probably doing it.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, that was a very fun listen. I appreciate again you giving me your list. So I like to wrap with a series of goofy questions. And the first would be, if you are a person that has a bucket list, and let's just say you've got a top three, and you're handed all the resources necessary to tackle those top three, what is the thing that you're going to go after first?
And this is a universal bucket list?
Yep, for Sid Sowder, yeah.
There is a soccer pitch in the Faroe Islands.
What?
That is just like right on the ocean, like literally balls must go in there constantly. It is the most beautiful place I've ever seen.
Really?
I really would like to go see a match there.
Nice.
So if
How did you come to learn
photos
about
online?
Just randomly discovered it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know exactly how that happened, but I saw pictures of it and went, oh, I want to see a match there.
Cool.
So,
Very cool. You get to have lunch with anyone, dead or alive. You're choosing who and why.
well, it seems like that should be one I have an answer for, right? That's a question that people ask. How about Emma Goldman?
And she is...
She was a feminist, radical anarchist, very much engaged with the Chicago folks in the fight for 40-hour work weeks, things of that sort.
Oh, wow.
But she was also very much a feminist. I won't say she was a suffragette. She fought a little differently, but I don't know. I think it should just be a fantastic conversation because she cut through bullshit so well.
How did you learn about her?
I think probably it started with punk rock, bands like Crass and Subhumans, and learning more about anarchy that way, picking up magazines like Profane Existence, Practical Anarchy. And kind of that was all my basis. And then more active in college with a group of folks there that introduced me to kind of the canon of Kropotkin and Bakunin and all of the big thinkers. But for me, Emma was always just so direct and just so punk rock.
Cool. I love that answer. You're given the ability to visit your past self at any age you're choosing. What age are you choosing, and what are you saying?
Well, 1994, we're going to go back to Sid as he was starting out his career in earnest, and tell him to buy a whole lot of Apple stock. Because at that point, it was like nothing before Steve Jobs came back. So that will help. Now I'll be able to look at the bank account once I get back and go, oh, sure, I'll fly to Faroe Islands on my own jet.
Yeah, right.
That'd be wonderful.
I might go twice next week.
No, I mean, it's
kidding.
a silly answer, but I think that I'm pretty happy with where things have gone. I don't know that I would go back to any era and say, do something very differently.
Sure.
I had a major injury when I was 15.
Oh, really?
I'm blind in one eye.
Oh, okay.
And so I might go back and tell myself to duck.
Oh, shit.
So
right?
that might be something. But,
Yeah.
But I think of those two, the Apple probably do be better in the long term.
I like it. Complete this for me, please, if you would. The world would immediately become a better place in which to live, if only.
We all went vegan.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I think that there is an empathy that is missing for everything. So I think that, and certainly everything includes us as people, but I think a conscious vegan diet where you understand what you're eating and what you're not eating and why adds that empathy. I think there are so many environmental issues that could be solved. I think issues around world hunger, land management. There's just a whole lot there that I think that would be solved.
Are you vegan yourself?
Yeah.
And have been for...
I went vegetarian in 1990. And I've been vegan most of that time, with the exception, I think, 3 years where I was just vegetarian.
Wow. Okay. And like there was never a noticeable drop or shift in your overall energy and feeling and so forth?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I know it's been my body's changed quite a bit in the last 35 years.
Sure.
But I don't think so.
Okay.
And honestly, I do just fine.
Yeah.
So when
The uneducated, where I go immediately is, well, where do you get protein from? Is that a stupid curiosity?
It is. It's the common question.
Okay.
But I think the answer is nuts and legumes for
Okay,
me.
okay.
I get plenty there.
Nice.
But without hijacking the podcast, I think our early estimates on how much protein people needed was really based on other animals more than people, which had different protein needs. So we don't need nearly as much as people thought we did anyway.
Oh, okay. No cheese. That's just...
Yeah, I don't do any. I'm vegan.
Yeah.
I also don't do any chocolate, so I do no caffeine at all.
Wow. Okay.
And Straight Edge at one point kind of had a no caffeine feel to it, and I think maybe it doesn't anymore. But that's something that I continue to do.
Okay. Now, are you pretty close to the same bedtime every night kind of guy, or does it fluctuate?
It's a fun question. People are like, are you a night owl or are you a morning person? And the answer for me is both.
Okay.
I don't sleep a lot. So for me, bedtime most nights is pretty standard, around about 1 o'clock.
Okay.
And then I don't use an alarm, but I'm always up by 8.
Interesting.
Usually 7.
And
So
no coffee.
no coffee.
Not even. I mean, you wouldn't even drink a decaf situation.
I don't do decaf though. I mean, there's a very minimal amount of caffeine in there
Right.
still, but I don't. I've
Okay.
never been a coffee person.
Sure. That and so not so much tea either, huh?
I have herbals. I won't, not after a black coffee or anything, but any combination of happy herbs is going to make a nice tea, a chamomile or whatever.
Okay, cool. True or false? It is okay and acceptable to wear the T-shirt of the band whose show you're going to.
Oh, I think perfectly acceptable.
Okay, fair enough.
Better to wear it the next day at school. That way everyone knows you went.
Bingo, I like that. Too Much Rock. TooMuchRock.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Apple Music, SoundCloud, as you mentioned, pretty much anywhere. What didn't we cover about it?
Yeah, I think we mentioned that there's the singles component. Most of it is really just around me going to shows, taking pictures, taking video, writing about them. And then the podcast that happens every week as well. And those are kind of the 3 big things that make up Too Much Rock.
And are you the type of podcaster that wants to drop on the same day each week at the same hour? And if so, what are those?
Yeah, I usually record on Sundays, and we go live on Monday. It publishes Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and then I usually start hitting. It's all programmed ahead of time, but
Sure.
And then it hits, I think, like Twitter at noon or something, and then it hits Facebook at 7 p.m. And
Oh,
so
you've got deliberate times for different platforms based on...
whatever the robots tell me. When the robots say that more people are paying attention at a particular time, so that's when I try to hit things.
Is that a thing that you just Googled, or?
No, I mean, when you're using the kind of the platforms to publish, the advanced versions at least will tell you when you
Really?
have the biggest audiences.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Well, I'm really grateful anytime somebody comes over to sit with me and talk for a little bit about themselves and music, and it's time is a big ask. And so I appreciate you being here. I really admire the heck out of your project and its longevity and the scope and the focus on local, and just, my first sentiment when I came across I think it was your Facebook page, was a little bit of shame in that I hadn't heard of you before. Because I think a lot of kudos should be sent your way for tackling music. To me is one of the most beautiful things about the human existence, and documenting it, sharing it, promoting it, et cetera, is worthy of all the praises in my mind. So I'm glad that you do what you do and started what you started, and I guess I'm also thankful that you don't know when to stop.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it as small as Kansas City is, there's still. I saw a band the other day that I had never seen before, and then realized that they'd been around for 10 years.
Oh
and I'm
my!
like, how is it possible that I've been doing, say, an average of 3 shows a week for 20 years in this town, and I have never seen this band? And so, as small as it is, there's still a lot out there.
Right.
So that's the good news. We still yet to discover the best things, maybe.
Right. Well, Sid Sowder, Too Much Rock. Appreciate you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.